Welcome. This is Leaders with Leverage. I'm your host, Susie Tomanchuk, and I'm so happy you're here. This is a solo episode. And so often I just kind of jump on and talk about something that came to mind in coaching a person or talking to a team. And I just had to bring this topic up. And I'll tell you, I'll kind of frame it for you by zooming back into my career and telling you a story about me. I was a sales executive and I sold technology basically. We used to send signals up into the satellites, and we had these encoders and all this chain actually of hardware that would do all of the encryption and uplink and all the things for all the services. And so I was working with big media companies because they were taking our services. And so often I'd have to bring engineers with me. And what I started realizing, the thing I would do is I would go into a meeting, I'd be talking to somebody that's a CTO or somebody that's very technical. And I would say, well, I'm not very technical. And I was just setting their expectations that I'm not the technology person. And so I would just say that. And as time went on, I started getting more familiar with our technology and all the things because I was with the engineers all the time. So it took a long time. I'm not an engineer. I'm not just naturally tech savvy, but I do catch on and I really listen well. And so years went on and I realized I kept saying, I'm not technical, but I really could answer the questions. And I remember one day I brought an engineering person with me, and I remember thinking they were answering the questions, and I was like, oh, I know all the answers to this. It's so interesting. And I started understanding when I needed to answer to bring them into the meetings and when I didn't, which, they didn't mind as long as I wasn't answering the questions wrong. But I still led with, I'm not technical. And I had to really make an intentional shift to do that. So I'm kind of sensitive about that because what I realized is I was working with this lawyer one time and I was answering a question. This was like one of my favorite memories of my career, actually, because I'll never forget, if in case he's listening, Justin Smith. He's a lawyer. He does all the business deals for distribution, like brilliant guy. Really, really love working with him. And I remember he said to me, were you a schooled engineer? And I was like, oh my gosh, like he thinks I'm technical. And it just was kind of this aha moment for me that I needed to drop that kind of label I was giving myself. It was out of wanting to be vulnerable and tell people kind of project who I am so that they would just kind of know where I sat. And I see when people do this now. So I'm working with this guy, and it was the first session we had together. And I just started noticing he said a couple things to me. He said, I don't want to sound arrogant, but, and then he didn't sound arrogant. He just told me the facts of the situation, that he was the one that figured out this very complicated situation. And then later in the conversation, he goes, well, I don't want to sound cocky, but, and he tells me a story. And I said, time out, stop qualifying, stop projecting this insecurity that you have. And so what I see is people will hear feedback about them, and it might be that you're too direct, or you don't you don't you don't have succinct answers to things. And they will then kind of make that a part of their language that they talk to people, and they'll say, well, I don't really answer questions well, but let me try to answer this for you. And what that does is it kind of seeds this idea about the person, about you, that you don't want people to think about you. So you're giving them a nugget that you don't want them to be, you don't want to be a perception of you. And you're allowing that to happen a lot sooner in the relationship. So I guess I just wanted to come on and say, think about how you're qualifying yourself. How are you framing your talents? think about the things and the way that you say things. Are you framing something in a way that you don't want people to get to know you in those first conversations? um, Making these tweaks to who we are and thinking about what we're projecting, because the perceptions that people get of us aren't just from their experience of us, they're also through what we communicate to them. And when we say these things out loud, we hear it and we perpetuate something about us, but we're also giving them a little piece into something that maybe we're working on or that we're insecure about. And it might not help us to tell them that. So I'm not saying drop it all the way. Maybe it's a good strategy in early in your career or at a time when you're taking on a new role and you're in discovery mode, but be aware of maybe it becoming a habit where it just becomes your thing that you say at the beginning. And think about how you're qualifying, how you're framing yourself to others. So that's all. I just wanted to come on and say that because I think it's a really powerful thing that people need to remember and be reminded about. So I hope this was helpful. If you hear somebody do this, share this with them. And it's a win-win, right? It helps them be thoughtful about what they're doing and how they're projecting themselves, but it also helps them see that you think about them. So do that, because that investing in others is a way of building your influence and building a relationship of trust. So do that, and join me next time. Make sure you follow. If you follow, whenever there's a new episode, you'll see it pop up for you. And so I don't want you to miss it. I'm on LinkedIn. Feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions, if you have something you want me to cover. If you have a question, I'd love to hear from you. So thanks for joining me. This has been Leaders with Leverage. I'm Susie Tomanchuk.